Okay.
No, I can't wait for this one. Yeah.
This will be fun. It'll be entertaining.
I don't mean the interview. I mean the election. I can't wait. I can't wait for
Oh
Tuesday.
my God. I was talking to, we're recording right now, by the way, but I was talking to somebody last night and he says to me, I really don't want to turn the clocks back. And I said, why? He says, I don't want this year to last one more second longer.
I think at this point we all understand that feeling.
Yeah, and I look out here at the snow and I think, gee, I wonder if the schools will be closed. I'd say yes. So here are my thoughts. And, chime in whenever you think I'm inaccurate or,
Okay.
and I'll obviously ask you a few questions. You and I have known each other for a number of years now. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, how we became acquainted was over the debacle of the Rell administration and the unemployment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, okay. What you did at that time, not just for the people of New Haven and communities, was you used social media, which at that point was really still in its infancy, and you garnered, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people to call the Capitol and the governor, Jody Rell, and demand justice to improve software to start processing unemployment claims. People were losing their houses. People were getting evicted because they had no money, and the claims couldn't be processed online. So
I can tell a little bit about that because I think that was one of my first experiences in how to do this a little bit differently. So it was very early in my time in the legislature, and people, I think, had contacted a lot of other people. And no one really knew how to deal with the issue. Now, let me just make sure people understand. The issue was that we were in a time not too dissimilar from now where a big crisis happened and we weren't prepared for the crisis. So it was right after the financial collapse. And of course, because of that, people were filing unemployment in ways that they don't normally file it, at rates that they don't normally file it. So they contacted all the people who were in power, who've been around for a while, and finally they found this guy who was new, right? And that was me, kind of as a last resort, which is completely understandable, by the way. And I felt like we needed to do something. I had no idea of what to do. But as I started thinking, I come from an activist and organizing background, I started saying to myself, there are a lot of people who are unemployed right now. And maybe we can use the fact that there are a lot of people to do something. So I put my mind to it and recognized that the issue they had was that the computer system that the state had and the phone system the state had weren't working. And I realized that with all of those people, whose computers and phones were working still? The governors. And so, I created, first I talked to a reporter that I had met and asked the reporter to ask the governor what was going to happen, because I tried myself to contact the Department of Labor, and they basically told me, hey, we're doing everything we can, and that's it. And I wasn't satisfied with that, so I asked the reporter to ask the governor if she thought the Department of Labor's response was adequate, and she said she did. And that, quite frankly, pissed me off, right? Even if you do think that most politicians will pretend, at least, that they care. And so I said, let me organize these people. And I knew that people were starting to follow me because I was at least engaging. And so I went to Facebook and created a Facebook page with a name that was entirely too long. And the name of the page was Governor Rell, the Department of Labor's response is not adequate. Entirely too long.
What the hell?
I started telling the people who had contacted me, look, we're going to use this as a space to organize, tell other people. And, in no time, we had 2,500, 3,000 people. And then I said, well, I have all these people. What are we going to do with them? And what I said to them was on the Tuesday that was coming up, what I wanted them to do between 8 a.m. And 12 is just start emailing and calling the governor's office. And I gave them the contact information so that effectively they can't use their computer and effectively they can't use their phone. And so surprise, surprise, somehow the governor decided that she needed to put some eyes on this, and eventually she put some resources to it that she had prior to that said she couldn't do. Now, when the reporter went back and asked the governor, she said it had nothing to do with the organizing efforts, but we kind of know how that came about.
Well, yeah, I mean, they pulled in retirees, right? And there were these people that at the time, I don't know if the state still does this, but they were 90-day people.
Yeah.
Who were retired, or they were doing 90 days and so on and so forth. And, you know, they pulled those people in. All of a sudden, the software improvements that couldn't possibly be done were, were like, you know, in 48 hours,
That's
we're
amazing.
done. You know, if we look, NBC came to our apartment in, we were living in Shelton at the time, came to the apartment. And if I look real hard, I can still find that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're up in Hartford with your little cute suit, you know.
Yeah, I think that's when they knew that I was a little bit different.
Yeah, and you know, within a week, the whole thing was solved.
Yeah.
My point, you know, and then from that point on, you and I became allies. You know, and I've repeated this 100 times. You're like the little brother I never wanted, but. Anyway, and we've worked together on different things over the time, not as much as I would have liked, you know, given my locale or my physical limitabilities or whatever. But a few years ago, we lived in, where I'm going to lead to, Gary, is the police accountability thing. I do this as quickly as my mouth will allow me. But a few years ago, Alex and I, Alex being my daughter, spent 3 of the worst years of my life living in Hill North. We were, unbeknownst to us, about to land in the midst of some of the most animalistic behavior that I've ever encountered in my life. And I was born and raised in Chicago. I've seen a couple of things. I'm 65 years old, you know? So anyway, this horror culminated finally in Alex being severely attacked on the front porch of the house that we were living in. She was beaten over 30 times. She had her hair ripped out of her head by the roots of her. She suffered a concussion. I proceeded to get pepper spray and pepper sprayed everybody I could get my hands on. And, you know, eventually through the legal thing, just as an aside, when I was in the probation thing, because I was ticketed for the pepper spray, and I was in the probation department and, you know, the office there in the courthouse. And I said, and I'll tell you what, I'll do it again. And everybody in the office said, yep. You know, she's what, 30 something years old, Gary, until the day I die. That's my child.
Absolutely.
And you can understand that now, the position you're in. So anyway, when this horrible, horrible, horrible thing happened, you know, I was writing about it on Facebook or wherever, and you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but you came to me and said, Dawn, how can I help?
Yeah.
You had no obligation to do that. You know, you're not a member of the police department. You're not a member of you know, at that point of City Hall. You're not, quote unquote, stationed in New Haven. But what you did was what every politician, what every human being should do. You came to our aid.
Yeah.
You met with then one of my heroes, Chief Campbell, and you and he and Lieutenant Minardi ensured our safety until the letters of protection could be in place. We had round the clock police presence outside of our house. Every time Alex was late coming home from work, I could text Lieutenant Minardi and he'd say, okay, let me check and see where she is. You know,
Mhm.
the police department's response, you know, initiated by your response was something that I can never repay.
Mhm.
Um, Eventually it allowed us in part to get out of the apartment and to get someplace safe where we are
Right.
now. And part of, as an aside, part of getting me out of the apartment, because yeah, I was pissed and I was hurt, but I wasn't stupid. We got we got 6 months of our rent back, and,
Mhm.
and that's how we moved. But anyway,
Can I say something to that?
of
Because I think
course,
there's a piece of this that's important. First, I don't think it matters where you're stationed, right? I think it matters that you have the ability to help. Um, Now, having said that, I believe I probably said to you what I say to everybody. I'll see what I can do. I'm not going to make any promises. And people take that various ways. Some people actually are upset with that because they're in a vulnerable space and they need help, and you've chosen to reach out and you're telling them that I'm going to try to help, but I might not be able to help. And sometimes the response is actually negative for that. But I think we owe it to the people that we're attempting to help to first make sure that they understand we really want to help, but we don't know what's going to come out of this. Um, but also, the thing that's important about that is, as we get into this conversation about police accountability, is the way the police responded for you is exactly what the bill is about. That's the type of response that every citizen is owed, whether they're old, young, black, white, whatever the case may be. And that's really at the core of what this whole issue has been about. And some people have chosen to make it about everything but that. And that's unfortunate because I think um, given that the bill is the law, down the road, this is just going to be how people come into the force, and it's going to be what they understand. It's not going to be the issue it is right now, but it doesn't have to be the issue that it is. It can be that we understand that you only ask the police for the type of protection that everyone imagines they have and everyone else has, but it's not true. And so I just wanted to make that point because I think it's important in this discussion. I think it's been lost in the conversation about the hatred of the police and all of the other things, except for the fact that all we're saying is when police come into our communities, if they don't live in the community, they're like anyone else. They're visiting our communities, and we ask that when they visit our communities, they treat our communities with care and respect.
yeah, exactly. Um, I, when I was first contacted by you about this incident, I never had any expectations of anything coming out of it. Certainly not the police protection that we received, and certainly not any sort of special. But I was just so infuriated. I
Mm-hmm.
was angry. I was powerless. I felt guilty. I didn't protect my daughter to the way that I wanted. Um, and through your efforts, through the police efforts, I am forever indebted. Having said that, for you at this point, and I'm going to be real honest with you, okay? Some clown, 20-something-year-old in some rally somewhere utters the phrase, defund the police. Oh my God, you would think we were all saying it, and we were all saying it in unison. And I have not, from the initial, defund the police, I've never heard that phrase again, other than people who are in just can't not drop it. The majority of people are not to defund the police. And so stop it. Stop saying that. Stop thinking that. It's retarded. It's immature. It's childish. Knock it off. I cannot be any bigger of a supporter of the police. I have seen officers who I would just as soon do without, no question, as we all have. There's a couple in the hill, I'm telling you. But by and large, even living here in Westville, you know, we have this Lieutenant Rosa he's just come up with a decision for this apartment complex that's like genius. So taking all of that into consideration, knowing how you have worked with the police, at least on our behalf, if not on others' behalves, and I know that you have, I want you to set the record straight, or have the opportunity to set this record straight. That one portion of this that everybody's jumping up and down about, where you have been misquoted, where you have been frankly lied about, that's not who you are as an individual, and it sure as hell isn't who you are as a human being, you know?
So, yeah, so this conversation is complex, right? So,
we got an hour.
what is interesting to me is how the call to defund the police got weaponized, right? So whatever you think about people's perspective on this, defund the police is a spectrum of things, right? It goes from at its most extreme, take all the money away from police and we don't need police, meaning abolish them, to we need to reduce the monies we give to police and shift them into other places appropriately, right? So for the resources to do things that police aren't capable of doing. And if you really think about it, particularly if you look at the work that I've done here in Connecticut, ever since I started doing any form of police accountability, and it started before the 2015 accountability bill, what the police have come in their lobbying efforts to tell the legislature is, while you're trying to do this thing to make us better able to do our job, which we don't like, what you really should be doing is putting the resources into the places where they should be, instead of asking us to do those things. The messages align. The police are saying, we should not be doing these jobs, and you keep us doing these jobs. And so as I've watched this, I find it interesting that while the two sides are actually, there are people at the extreme of no police, but for the most part, while the two sides are actually saying an extremely similar thing, there's all of this contention, right? When you think about it, there actually shouldn't be all of this contention, because the smart thing to do is to have police for what police are for, to have social workers for what social workers for, to have mental health experts for what they're for, to have people for what they're for. That's how you spend money the most efficiently. And that's what I've engaged in doing. I don't engage in a conversation about abolishing the police, because if we were to ever have that conversation, you'd have to have this conversation first, right? And so I'm not engaged in that conversation. I'm also not someone who is critical of those people, because people have their own way of thinking and they can have their way of thinking. But the conversation we are having is about reallocation of resources where they need to go. Now, let me say this. The bill doesn't reduce the funding to police in any way. What the bill does is the bill says we need to understand what the landscape is. And so we need to look at what it would mean to have social workers in place, what it would mean to have mental health workers in place, what it would mean to have people who can engage in the community in a way that police for years have been saying to us we need to do. And what people recognized was that nationally there's a conversation about defunding the police that has been weaponized. And so they chose to connect that weaponized conversation to the bill because they didn't want the bill. And what it's done is obfuscated what the bill does. It's unfortunate because, again, look, I don't have to agree with anybody, but I do think we need to have these conversations in truth. And this conversation has not been a conversation about truth. It's been politicized and weaponized. And the bill is actually seeking to do something that both sides of this equation think is a good thing.
Okay, let me just play devil's advocate. Okay, when I think the stats, and correct me again if I'm wrong, there's 85 million going into the police department in New Haven annually, which sounds like a staggering amount of money.
Mm.
And at our community management team meeting this past month was that gentleman from City Hall, whose name I won't even attempt to say because I'll destroy it. He wants to bring about one of these departments that you're talking about with the social workers and the this and the that and the to intercede in cases of, you know, drug overdose and so on and so forth. Now, there's a certain amount of opposition to that, and I'm one of these people, okay? And my opposition to it is that I question the purpose. And not even the purpose, but is it really necessary? For example, we tried to get him, myself and another member of the meeting, tried to pin him down, this gentleman from City Hall. I think his last name is Dalal. I'm not sure. But anyway, we tried to pin him down to actual numbers. For example, out of 100 911 calls, how many of those calls would be handled by this portion of the act or bill or whatever you want to call it? You know, that could be handled by a social worker, mental health intervention, drug addiction and alcoholism support, et cetera, et cetera. We couldn't pin him down to an actual number.
Yeah.
So I would think, I'm no expert, but I would think that's important to be able to know that. You know, and that gives me credence on, he's looking at a budget right now of $200,000 to get this thing off the ground.
What we said in the bill, and that's exactly the point. What we said in the bill is not you will start doing this. What we said in the bill is we need to understand what the landscape is. We need to understand what the need is, right? And so the bill calls for departments to do that assessment, because we've had other places in the country where we looked at police departments, and we know that across every place that we've actually looked at it, the need is higher than people thought it was, right? But we don't know what the need.
I'm sorry, Doc.
The need is higher than people would have assumed it is.
Okay. Yeah.
But we don't know what the need is locally, and we need to know that so that we can know what we're doing. Listen, I'm a person that no matter what I feel about an issue, I want to know how the issue actually works. I want to know what the data says. I want to know what reality is where we are, and so that's why the bill was crafted that way. And so this bill actually seeks to get that information so that we can make an informed decision. It doesn't require after we get that information that we do one thing or the other. Once we get the information, then we take the next step that is appropriate for the information we have.
And why does it take New Haven $200,000 to get that information?
Well, I'm not involved in New Haven's conversations.
You know, well, it doesn't seem like there are many people who are, Gary. But one of the parts of this that was just infuriating to us was as part of his presentation, he and he had a colleague with him, they kept bringing up Eugene, Oregon as comparable to, are we seeing the problem here? And there is no way that you can compare the demographics to Eugene, Oregon to New Haven, Connecticut. Not just in terms of its population, but in terms of its income, its median income of its residents, the intrusion of Yale, the ineffectiveness of Yale, housing, you're comparing apples and oranges, aside from the fact that they're both cities. So I look at this as an attempt to, CT Transit, came up in this whole discussion. I said, I hate this. This is exactly what CT Transit does. They start comparing Connecticut to New York. Stop it. And so right away, I'm suspect. I'm thinking, okay, this is just another layer of unnecessary bureaucracy that you're going to ask the taxpayers of New Haven to pay for, when in effect, you want to balance. I'll be naive and stupid enough to just say, you want to balance the budget, you want to bring more cash into New Haven? Not a bad idea. Here's the first thing you do. Everybody in the top 1% of salaries, 10% pay cut. You know why? 10% out of their pockets is going to make a hell of a lot less of an impact than it is on mine.
Yeah, if I could talk about the way that he, as you related to me, how he seems to be operating versus what I'm talking about. So when the conversation that we've been having is about reallocation, right? And the reason for that is because look, people are strapped as it is before COVID. In certain places like New Haven, taxes
Can
are
I just interrupt you just real quick? I just got the rental rebate check. You know, we get you remember the rental rebate check? And over $50 is taken out of it because the budget can't afford it.
Right.
You're talking about people on disability and the elderly. Are you kidding me? Greenwich can't afford it. Takes a little bit bigger. Yeah, please. So anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the reason we're talking about reallocation is because we weren't talking about layering something on top of this that adds to cost. As a matter of fact, if we did it right, what we should see is a reduction in cost, right? And so, but everybody has their own approach, and everyone has their own thoughts on this. So as you ask questions about why New Haven asked for whatever amount of money it's asking for through the individual, I can't answer the question because even though I have something to do with the bill that we're talking about, I'm not involved in that conversation.
Right.
And so you're going to see, I imagine, this thing roll out in as many different ways as places it rolls out in terms of looking at it.
I think what my problem is with this too, aside from questioning whether it is in fact necessary, is so now the police accountability bill, right, is getting diluted or confused or distorted by all of this other stuff. That it's like some group of people hitched onto this, let's create this organization or whatever, this group, I don't know what you would call it, to handle the reallocation of funds. And what they're doing is they're making this so much more complicated. Go to Yale New Haven Hospital and have them kick in. Boom, done. And so it's going to take away from the essence of police accountability. Am I making myself clear, or am I?
I think I get what you're saying. I would say this. I don't want, given the way that this conversation has happened, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that that's the one of like several big things that's taking away from this bill. I think there are several other things that are really derailing the conversation. But I think this conversation is going to take a while. As I said, I haven't been directly involved in the efforts here in New Haven because we had the police accountability bill. I think the efforts actually began before we passed the bill, if I remember correctly. And then we go right into the election. Plus, we have COVID. So I haven't been directly involved in that. So I don't comment on things that too much that I don't know about. But even after that group figures out what it's going to do, right, you then have to go through the legislative process here. And so I think there's plenty of time to figure out what's going on. I will say that on the police accountability bill, the parts that are more dangerous are these conversations about the use of force and the consent searches and qualified immunity. And those conversations are disturbing because the people who are helping to gin up those conversations actually were a part of this conversation and know what the bill really does, and still choose to go out and say something completely different than what the bill does.
Why
And
is
that's
that?
because it's politics and they want to win. And we're in the middle of an election, and if you don't have anything to sell people, you can sell them fear. Right? I don't
Yeah.
have any.
Yeah.
It's what you watch the president doing. It's what you watch my opponent doing.
Well, you may watch him, but I don't.
Touche.
But your opponent, you don't have an opponent. Stop it.
You've known me long enough to know I take everything seriously.
I can say what you can't say.
But it is what people do when they don't have a foundation from which to operate. And so, look, Republicans.
What happens when people aren't told the truth, Gary? The truth is the truth is the truth. That's all there is to it. And when people are fed a lot of crap, that's what they're going to believe.
Right. And then what happens is, even though you may have done something good, you still have to chase the lie. Right. So even in my election, right now, there's a lie out that says that I helped Hartford over New Haven, right? And I helped Hartford in the Hartford bailout for $500 million when New Haven was struggling and had to raise taxes. Well, it turns out that was in a budget that we passed in 2017 when the budget came very late in the year because we were tied 18-18 in the Senate, and we just couldn't get a budget done. We didn't pass a budget till October. And when that budget came on the floor, I had a problem with the budget because the budget, rental rebate, it did some negative things to rental rebate. It did some negative things to other programs. It did some all over the place. And sometimes you vote for those things because on balance, it's still good enough, right? But from my perspective, it wasn't. So I stood up and said, this bill isn't what we should be doing. It's not, even though you have Democrats and Republicans voting on it, it's not good enough. And then I voted against the bill. And my opponent has put out there and spent money to put out there that I was one of the people who helped to put this through, and that I'm Hartford's favorite senator. And I think Dad and the people who are talking about police accountability and not telling the truth, that's not the way to win an election. That's not the way to move forward, because you started off lying to the people you say you want to represent and do well by. And how do I do well by you if I won't tell you the truth? Right? I've told people the truth and they've been angry with me, but I can walk away and say, look, I had nothing else I could tell you because that's what's true. And
Right.
And you don't have to like it. You have an election and you don't like what I said, you vote me out. That's how it works. Right? But I can't lie.
You either vote for, you either recognize integrity or you don't. And the other thing is, saying you have an opponent, come on, admit your baggage, dude. Somebody hands me an envelope with $7,000 in cash in it, I know what's in the envelope. And when you're part of that group and you have federal agents knocking on your door, admit it. And
I'm
whether or not it's true, and this is coming from my mouth, not your mouth, Gary, my mouth. Whether or not it's true, it's there. Yes, there's an investigation. Yes, there are questions that people much brighter than me know the answers to. Don't sling mud that you can't catch. Don't think that you're coming through this, all Peter Pan and White Knight and all this kind of foolishness, because you're not.
Yeah.
And if you can't step up and be honest right at the start of the race, you're done. You have no integrity. Your agenda is suspect. You as an individual are suspect. And from here on in, you are not believable. That's it.
I mean, again, I'm not going to get into that because that's not what. But I think in these elections, beyond mine, I think you're supposed to be trying to convince people of what you're going to do.
Right.
And if you spend the entirety of your time even if what you were saying is true, if you spend the entirety of your time talking about the other person, no one knows what you're going to do. No one knows why they're voting for you, and that's just not the smartest thing you could do. And also, people shouldn't usually. I don't think should vote for that because you don't know what you're getting. All you know is that person had some issue with the person they're running against. And let's be honest, if you're running against somebody, you have a vested interest in trying to tear them down. Or you could have a vested interest in telling people what it is you're going to do. Look, I've spent my campaign, and as I'm not talking about the thing you were just talking about, I spent my campaign not talking about all of that stuff. Because what I'm saying to people is I have a record, right? And it's a public record. And what I'm saying is, if you want to know what people are going to do, look at what they've been doing. And I'm happy to stand on my record, right? And it's not just in one area, because a lot of people focus on my criminal justice work. It is a broad record. And each and everything that I've done has incorporated the voice of people. Look, I just put up a post on Facebook, and I'm putting up several posts in the last couple of days about the ability I've had because people put me in that place, not because I'm special, but because they put me in that place to actually not just say that people are going to have a voice, but to really tell stories as we do these things, to make plain what it is we're doing. If I might, what I want people to understand about police accountability is that it has nothing to do with one thing or the other. It has to do with all of it. It has to do with the history that we're all wrapped in, that I'm wrapped in. When I was 14 years old, I went to school in Manhattan at the High School of Art and Design. I lived in the Bronx. And I would get up in the morning real early as a 14-year-old and jump on the bus in my neighborhood and take the bus to the 6th train and take the 6th train down to 59th Street and get off and walk over to school. And in those interactions that I had in the subway system were interactions with the police. Now, I said I was going to school, so I'm supposed to be in the subway system. But when I was in the subway system and I would see a cop, I would get disappeared, right? I would make sure I get out of the area, particularly when I was coming home, when I was with some friends who were going in the same direction. Not because I was doing anything, but because if you grow up in that area, you know what the relationship between police and young Black men are, right? That's part of the history. It should never be the case that I'm trying to avoid the police just so I can go to school or go home, but it's true. As I've driven around as an adult, all right, I've had interactions that people talk about with the police. None of that should happen. And beyond that, because everybody wants to focus on the killing of George Floyd, the killing of this one or that one, or Breonna Taylor, all of those things are important. But on a day-to-day basis, when people aren't being killed, there's still fear. There's still an inability to look at that officer who's in your community and say, I'm sure that the relationship is what it's supposed to be. And that's what the bill has been about. There's a distribution of power that the government allows, and it's going to be disproportionate because the cop has the gun and the ability to arrest and the ability to take your freedom, right? But it doesn't have to be what it is. And so what my point in doing this bill is to right that relationship, to fix that power, because we give that power. And so we should think about what it means to give that power and how we regulate that power. And that's what this issue is to me.
Yeah. Does your bill, I don't know if it does or if it doesn't, does it address training officers? And it seems that a lot of officers, not a lot, let me back off that. But it seems like when I look at all of these incidents across the country and whatnot, because I don't think it really happens all that often in New Haven, thankfully. But there seems to be a question of judgment, spur of the moment judgment. And I understand the anxiety and I understand, but there has to be, I worked in a state psychiatric facility for 10 years. And we were trained how to handle those situations that were explosive, and to be able to handle them, bing, 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 and that sort of sense of justice doesn't seem to me to be all that prevalent in training.
We're about to get a visitor.
Huh?
So we're getting a visitor.
Oh my gosh, I've never seen him before. Good morning, Mr. Gary.
They make the
How old is he?
2. He'll be 3 in February.
Well, hello there. Oh, Alex would be in love. This is her
Yeah.
boy.
Oh,
You
his
know?
sister's coming now too.
Oh, good, of course. Let's get the family in. The wife around. Hello, baby. Oh, look at this. Are these the most precious kids?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so glad we're recording this.
We,
I've never met your kids.
Imani, say hello. Say hi.
Hi.
You want
Hi,
to say hi?
sweetheart.
You busy? We'll let you do what you're doing. So we address training some, and you know we've addressed. We've had a 2015, 2019, and now the 2020 police accountability bills. A lot of people don't recognize that, and each of those bills take a part of this. And so we're addressing those things. Now, the one thing I will say about training that is frustrating to me is that part of this is about the way that police interact with one community versus the other, right? In one community, they are capable of operating without any of this stuff happening, and in another community, they can't. And so to me, that's not just about training, that's about perspective.
First, you bring your baggage with you.
Right. And so, you know, look, I am a person who will do what we need to do for training. But what I think is important is that when someone operates outside of the norm, and the norm is not to operate in the ways we've seen on TV, that there actually are punishments for that behavior. If you operate outside of the norm, there's a punishment for you. If I operate outside
Every job has an accountability.
Right.
At some point, you have to step up and take
Right.
responsibility for your actions.
And what we've watched over the years on our television screens are things that people are like, there's no way. There's literally no way this could happen, and someone walk away, and they do. And so, yes, I am engaged in a conversation about making sure that when someone goes over the line, and we're not just talking about someone raising their voice, right? We're talking about people depriving you of your liberties in ways that shouldn't happen, depriving you of your existence, right? When that happens, there is the possibility of finding justice. And in this country, in large part, there has not been. And that's really, it's mind-blowing, but it's not something that I can tolerate.
Do you have a Pez in your hand?
She does. She has 2 Peppa Pig Pezzes. One Peppa and one.
Pezzes? I love Pezzes. I always thought if I had my life to do over, that's my collection. I would collect Pezzes.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. There has been, and you know, I love that saying, what's past is prologue. You know what I mean? Yeah. You know, if we don't remember the past, we're doomed to repeat it. Well, that's pretty trite. You don't really understand what that means, I think, in large part. Not you personally, but don't understand what that means. And what it means is that your past is influencing your present.
Absolutely.
There's no 2 ways about it. It's why Black people won't call the cops. It's why cops won't call, halt when they see other bad cops when they see other cops doing bad things. You know, it's because we have learned, and we run these tapes in our heads, and then we're all lesser than because of it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. And you know that notion that the past is prologue and we should have honest conversations about the past has irritated some people. So when we were doing the bill, I talked about the history of policing in this country, right? And some people want to talk about slavery, and I talk about that too. But what people need to know is it's not slavery now. It's slavery. It's the period after slavery. It's Black codes, the vagrancy codes that we had. It's Jimmy Lee Jackson. It's the genesis of the Black Panthers coming out of the relationship. It's every moment in time to this point. And if you look at a history where every moment in time says there's some problem in terms of the relationship between a specific community and the police, something is wrong. Something is rotten in the foundation of this. That doesn't mean that everybody who participates is evil or bad or whatever the case may be. In fact, the majority of them could be good, but they're still operating in a thing that hasn't dealt with its initial foundation that has a problem.
People have to learn how to explore their own selves. You know what I mean? Take a look at yourself and the way you react to things, the way that you deal with things. My life and Alex's life, when we lived in the hill, is diametrically different than the way that I approach life today. The stress of that and the horror of living through that. I can't imagine having living through that for years, Gary, and having that not have an impact on me, my family, and that impact is such an it would take years for it to stop and to ever recover, you know? And I don't know what the answer is, but I hope that with your bill, with your upcoming reelection, that we will honestly take our egos and take our agendas and put them back in our back pockets where they belong. And really start to deal with this as fellow human beings. You and I had talked about when this whole COVID thing started, was my hope that we would learn something through this. We can't even learn to keep masks on our faces and wash our damn hands, for crying out loud. But, you know, we have to learn something.
Right.
You know, obviously, Mother Nature's not all that happy with us. You know, and it will be to our peril.
Right.
Is this what we want our kids to be? Is this what we want our next generation to be?
Really? I mean, look, I will say this. As long as I'm around, I'm going to engage in having conversations that may be uncomfortable, but I think necessary to actually dealing with the systems we have. You know, I have these two and their older brother and sister. And I feel like we have a responsibility to lead the world differently. You can't lead the world differently if you're engaged in the same conversation that brought you to this point. And so it's not because I want to tear everything up and I want to, you really want to be on camera, don't you? And I really want, and I want to.
A Star is Born.
You have no idea.
Oh yes, I do.
But
See this painting behind me? Oh yes, I do.
But it's because that's how you change things. You can't try to change things and not have a conversation about what it really is. You know, some people are like, well, that's revisionist history. That's but I don't know how you revision a history for which you never actually had a vision. You never actually understood what it is. You know, look, there are people who think when you take down whatever anybody individually thinks about it, but who think that when you take down a Confederate monument, you're trying to change history, you're trying to rewrite history. But what they don't know is there are people who literally wrote books on a lost cause and created this thing that we now see as history, right? There are people who spent time putting up these monuments to tell a history that never was. And so when you take them down, that's not actually changing history. That's actually saying, hey, let's talk about history for real for the first time.
Yeah, let's talk about the truth here.
Right. And similarly, let's have a conversation about what policing is for the first time in a real way.
I thought it astounding that there were people who were actually going to vote for a candidate based on a statute. Come on, don't be silly. Yeah.
But the identity has become time. This is the beauty of what happened with this changing of history to become what people believe is real history. People's whole identity are tied up in the lie that history is. And so when you want to take it down, you want to tear it down and talk about what really happened, they're like, well, what about who I am? This is my heritage and my culture. But the thing is, like, if it's not real, it's not really your heritage. It's a false heritage.
Well, yeah, plus, Gary, I could teach you everything I know. You could teach me everything you know. You know what? I will still know everything I know.
Right.
You will still know everything you know. I lose nothing. So by taking a statue down, what have you lost? What
But
have
you know what you do?
You still are you. You know?
But hopefully, because you taught me what you know, I actually let that marry with what I know, and I actually understand the world differently.
Exactly.
Right? I have perspective that I couldn't have had before because my perspective was actually limited by the fact that the knowledge you have, I didn't share it. That's all that it is. It means you know more.
Right. Every so often I get this real brain thing, you know, and I bring myself back to center and I think every day I learn something new. Even at my old age of 65, every day I learn something new. And that newness has meant so much to me. I started in the last like 6 months or so, and I'm not going to belabor this point, but in the last 6 months ago, I got very involved with World War II. I don't know why, but you know, I was saying to a friend the other day, I know more about Winston Churchill than Winston Churchill knows about Winston Churchill. You know?
Yeah.
And enigma and all, and the genius of this war. You know, and the code breaking and the this and the that and so on and so forth. And it has just really bizarrely enhanced my life. I don't know why, but you know, you start, the more you know, the more you know. And,
Can I tell you, one of the things that I've said to people is that there is not enough time for me to read enough books, to study enough, to know all of the things that I need to know right now, right? So that's a perspective that we should be guided by. No matter how much I know, no matter what level of genius I have, I don't know enough, and there's more perspective to have. There's more knowledge to gain. And I think too many of us are content with the knowledge we have. Like, I know enough. I can't imagine that. I walk into a bookstore and I go, if I wanted to, I could not read every book in this store.
Yeah.
Which means the things that it just, if I dedicated my whole life to just learning, I couldn't learn.
Yeah.
Think about
Yeah.
it. And what it means for the possibility that my perspective, though it's real, may not be as correct as I think it is.
Yeah, it's your perspective. And I have to have the maturity and the self-awareness to be able to say, maybe I need to think more about this.
Right.
Maybe I need to discover more about this, read more about this. Because,
Absolutely.
you know, I'm not all that.
Right.
You know?
And I think people who do that, you can tell, right? They seem a little bit different. Something's a little bit off about you, but it's not really off. It's where we all should try to.
Right.
Right.
And that's kind of what I had hoped to start doing with this whole conversation thing, is to bring people out that people might not be as familiar with as I would like them to be at crucial periods in their life. You know, this to me is a crucial period in my life and in the life of New Haven, the life of this next election is going to be a real, man, I'm just holding my breath for Tuesday and really wishing it were Wednesday.
Listen, me, you, a lot of other people want Wednesday to come. Even though we may still be dealing with that, thank you. We may be still dealing with, the issues of the election. I think still we'll be able to take a breath and say, okay, we've hit that point in time, right? Now let's see what it means going forward. But here's the thing that I think is important that a lot of people, I don't think, can yet wrap their head around. When the election is over, when it's the 4th, the 5th, and going forward, it's not a point of walking away, right? If the last 4 years have told people anything, I hope it's that you have to be engaged. You cannot.
We're building a whole new country, hopefully.
Right. Look, I tell young people all the time because a lot of young people have a perspective that's like, this will not stand, and I'm changing it right now. And when I was younger, I've been doing this activism thing for 3 decades. When I was younger, I shared that perspective because I was young, right? And I thought, I'm here now. Things are going to be different for the fact that I'm here. And then I realized slowly over time that's not the case, but it's okay, right? The question is not whether things aren't going to change immediately. The question is, are you going to stay in the fight, right? Are you going to be here 2-3 decades later? Because I'll tell you, a lot of the people who were doing the kind of work that I was doing, they disappeared because they were like, there's a job to have, there's a family to have.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm from the 60s. Jerry Rubin.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell? What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I understand completely. Yes. Now, let me ask you something. Who's a hero of yours? Give me a hero.
I take something from a lot of people. People watch me on the Senate floor oftentimes quote Baldwin because I think Baldwin had the ability to put into words in a poetic way what this American experience was for
I can't believe what you say because I see what you do.
Right. And so many other things and just to watch him, and I'm like, I think the same thing. I just can't say it like that.
Yeah. Right. Right.
It's amazing to me, and so I look to people who have those oratorical skills and the ability to think deeply. One of the things that people often say to me, because normally when I show up to talk about something, I talk about the fact, but I tell the story of the thing, and people are like, where does that come from? I'm like, it's because of the people that I follow, the people that I study, because that's what they did. They were able to tell those stories. They were able to make it real because the story is what has impact, right? The facts are important, but it's the story that has the impact. So it's always going to be the people who had that ability.
Yeah. Conversation with anybody, living or dead, and it can't be your, like your dead aunt Gertrude. It's got to be somebody of some notoriety.
Wow, that's
good one, right?
Big question. Wow. You only get one. You only get one.
Great.
I mean, look. Of course, I like to talk to Baldwin, right? But I don't want to say him because I just used his name.
You got one person.
You know who I would like to talk to? A scholar, John Henrik Clarke, because John Henrik Clarke was a brilliant man. I'd love to have a conversation with him. I'd love to have been able to have a conversation with Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
I mean, she's brilliant, right? Like, who wouldn't want to be able to have that conversation? There are a list of
someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
There are huge names that James Cone, right? The brilliant mind of James Cone, who passed just not a year and a half ago or something like that.
Right.
Those are the kind of people who've done something, again, who've done a lot of thinking about where we are, the things we say, and the ways to address those things. Those are the people who I would like to. I mean, maybe even Nikki Giovanni because of her ability to encapsulate these things. So there are a lot of people. But also just everyday, I'll be honest, just everyday people. I love, who I love to talk to? Those young people I was just talking about, because their perspective on things is so important. And what I've realized, I hate to admit this, but that, I'm not as young as I once was, right? And so being able to talk with them and share with them the things I've learned so that they don't have to learn those things over, that's not the kind of thing that I think a lot of people would think is the answer to this question. But I will say that those conversations have huge impact, I think, on the future. And give me perspective on why, when this seems like the work is hard or it's an uphill battle, you should keep doing the work.
Are you good? Are you good coming into Tuesday?
I'm always good. Let me just say this. The election's important, and I think that I have carved out a unique place in the conversations we're having. But I've learned in my life that everything is an opportunity. And I am a religious person, right? So I believe, like a lot of people say, that when you come through the storm, you thank God, right? But I'm a little different in that I'm thankful that the storm is coming, because I've recognized that without the storm, you don't get to be thankful for coming out of the storm, and then every one of those storms is a lesson. And so I've changed my focus from being thankful for coming through it to be thankful for going to it. So if something doesn't turn out the way that I want it to, I say to myself, well, what's the lesson in that? What am I supposed to take from that? And I wake up every morning, and if you'll allow me, I'll tell a short story about my daughter, the oldest one, the 20-year-old. One day she came home and she was angry. You know how it is, right? She was like 16 or 17, something like that. Angry. And everything.
I can relate to that.
Right? I think anybody who's had a weekend, right? And like I watched her go back and forth and just anger and I said, come with me. And I walked out with her to the porch and I said, tell me what you see. And she's like, I don't know, I see the street. I'm like, no. What's going on? She's like, I don't know. What are you talking about? I was like, well, what's the weather like? She's like, I don't know. It's a clear day. I was like, did you know that? She's like, no. I said, really? So your perspective is focused on one small thing. And what I told her was, when you focus on that one small thing, you become as small as the thing you focus on. And so you got to, even in those moments where other things are going on, still be able to see everything around you, because everything's still around you. There are opportunities around you can't see. And so for me, look, I'm okay. I have him, I have her, I have the two older ones, I have my wife, I have my health. I'm okay no matter what happens. And everything, even a win or a loss, is an opportunity. And the growth comes from in recognizing that. So am I okay? Absolutely.
Gary, I got to tell you, between the time that you and I have met and the time that life has gone by and the changes in both of our lives, I am, and I've said this to you before, I am honored to know you. I cherish your friendship. I love watching the ride. And, I cannot tell you, thank you so much for this. And all my best on Tuesday. I think you got this, Val.
Thank you for having me.
Look at this guy. Look at this guy.
I know, it's amazing. It really is. I just put up a post on Facebook. I know we were like ending it, but I'm going to say something more. I just put up a post on Facebook about how he saw not his first snow, but the first one he recognized.
Sure.
Wow. The look on his face.
Yeah, right?
What it not just like the fact that he enjoyed it, like I enjoyed him enjoying it, right? And what I'm trying to do is be very present in these moments, because I know, like anything else, we miss moments, and it has been amazing to be that present, to recognize those things, to spend my time down on the floor every day. I will say that I didn't have that experience.
No.
Right? I didn't have a father who was like that, and
no, nor I. Yeah.
People have heard me talk about, and the way that I deal with that is to be, as close to super dad as possible. Right? I'm out doing all the political stuff, but every night we have dance party. And I'm never going to let y'all see me dancing.
Well, that's it. I remember when I was working on one of the campaigns with Paul Gianfrido, sitting on the floor of the campaign headquarters with Alex, she was probably their age, and we're doing with the Legos and everything. You know what I mean? And I even think there's pictures of it, This is what we do. You are mine. You will be mine. And that means you will be mine. Yeah. You know what I mean? Thank you so much, my darling.
Thank you.
Take it easy, babe.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.